What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Now, on today's episode, of course, we've got on a special guest. This is Max Keiser. He is a Bitcoin pioneer. He has been creating content in the Bitcoin space for about a decade. He is a Bitcoin OG. He is also an investor, an entrepreneur, a broadcaster, and an all-around very interesting guy. Welcome to the show, Max. How you doing?
Zuby, it's great to be with you.
Likewise, man. So I've done a brief intro right there, but for people who may not be familiar with who you are, tell them a little bit about yourself, Max.
Well, I started in 1982 on Wall Street as a stockbroker. That was my first job out of school. Did that for 8 years. Then I went into semi-retirement in Paris for 5 years. Then I came back to Los Angeles and started the Hollywood Stock Exchange. I got a patent on a virtual currency, patent number 5950176, the first patent awarded for a digital currency. Then I sold that company to Cantor Fitzgerald on Wall Street, went back to France, went back into semi-retirement. Then I met Stacy in the south of France, and we started doing content. She had a background with the BBC and in also Hollywood, doing script doctoring, some producing, and we started doing content. And then really by accident, we got commissioned to make a film for Al Jazeera English in 2005, I think it was, or 2006. And we ended up making a series of documentary films for Al Jazeera English. We were living in Paris at the time. And we started doing content for international broadcasters, basically. And we continued to do that. And we started doing Keiser Report on RT in 2009. We started covering Bitcoin in 2011 when it was $1. And it was, for me, it was a continuation of what I had been doing on Wall Street and with the Hollywood Stock Exchange. So I, really got into it quickly. Mm-hmm. And so we've been covering it now for 10 years. We've had most of the major players in the space have been on Keiser Report, I would say. We were pretty much the only ones giving it coverage for, I would say, the first 5 years or so. He didn't really get any coverage anywhere else. And then, and now we're in 2011, and it's exciting times.
Well, 2021.
2021, and it's exciting times.
Very exciting times.
A glitch in the system.
So how did you first discover Bitcoin? How did you even come across it?
Well, Stacy booked onto Keiser Report an interview with John Matonis, who was into Bitcoin heavily in 2011. He invented Hashcash, or Hushmail, excuse me, which was an encrypted email service. And then he got into Bitcoin. He came on and he talked about it on the show. And so we just jumped on it right away, realizing that it was, I saw it right away as this is going to change as a new asset class, effectively. So that has a lot of implications. And then Stacy was really intrigued by all the feedback we got, which was highly negative. I mean, it triggered people in the audience. They're like, "Why are you doing this? That's terrible. It's a shitcoin." And so we thought, if it triggers people like this so wildly, we should dig into it more and find out what's at the root cause of all this.
Okay.
So we had on folks in the early days from the cypherpunks and the early developers, early core developers. And, really, I would say we kind of exposed the world to Bitcoin in 2011. We put it on the map, globally speaking, because the show goes out to 100 countries, tens of millions of viewers. And there are, thousands of Bitcoin millionaires today that, because of Keiser Report, were buying Bitcoin when it was under $5.
Oh, man. So for anyone listening to this right now, I mean, if you've been checking the price of Bitcoin, you'll see that it's blown past $50,000 just in the past couple of weeks. And I think today is probably hovering somewhere around the $50,000 mark. So that's a 50,000x appreciation from $1. And from when it started, I don't even know, probably millions of percent. So what's that journey been like for you? I mean, I got into Bitcoin in 2017, but I'd heard about it a couple years before, but I didn't really do much research. I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't see what the value proposition was. It wasn't until 2017 that I really looked into it properly and got involved with it. So what's been that journey like? What's that journey been like over the past decade, being someone who was just there so early?
Well, we had three crashes, and the three halvings that we've had
Hmm.
since the first halving in 2012, and we've had three 90% crashes.
Wow. Yep.
And the first one was from $30 down to $1. Then we had
Hmm.
1,000 down to the 250 range, and then 20,000 down to 3,500.
Hmm.
And so those are really tough to go through.
Sure.
And you know, it's we had in 2017 the block size wars, which was a very significant piece of history,
Hmm.
where you had the hard forks and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision came around. And it was really then that it was proven that the miners don't really control the network. It's really the nodes that control the network. And this is when Michael Saylor actually, who had gotten into Bitcoin in 2013 and ignored it, he was aware of it. He
Okay.
kind of looked
Yeah.
at it and ignored it. But
Okay.
after the block size wars, he understood that it was a swarm of cyber hornets. He started to put the pieces together,
Yeah.
and then now he's absolutely crazy about Bitcoin, and he's leading this what I call a speculative attack against the central banks,
Mm.
and which is really a remarkable situation, which we can get into. But nevertheless, so it's been fraught with all kinds of drama. It's
Yeah.
up, it's
Yeah.
down, it's volatile. They've got incredible personalities that come and they go. Some go to jail, some die.
Yeah.
It's the period when Charlie Shrem was arrested at the airport and ended up going
Hmm.
to jail was a really hard period because we were covering Bitcoin at the time and we were heavily into it. And then suddenly we're like, what is, wait a minute. Are we going to jail? What's happening here?
Yeah.
So it was very difficult. Unlike today where you can just go to swanbitcoin.com/orange pill, and you can get $10 free Bitcoin by just signing up.
Hey, there
And
we go.
it's easy and you can get it, pulled right into your Casa wallet immediately and have multi-signature security, right? I
Yeah.
mean, all that stuff's brand new. It's so easy today to get into Bitcoin compared to typically you lose it, the wrong address, stolen. It's
Mm.
just like a totally wild situation. And today it's a lot easier, and the numbers prove it. The adoption
Yeah.
rates are going up quite quickly. The institutional money is coming in huge,
Hmm.
and so now we're at the sweet spot. If you look at it historically, if I go back to the dot-com era of the 1990s, as I mentioned, I started the Hollywood Stock Exchange in 1996. And then in 1997, I believe it was when Netscape went public. And that was really the beginning of what the dot-com boom era was, when
Hmm.
Netscape went public. Mark Andreessen, of course, was Netscape. And what did Mark Andreessen just do this week? He announced the public offering of Coinbase. And so
Hmm.
this is really going to be like that 1997 moment for Bitcoin, where we go from the whole phase of, is it real? Is it not real? Like we saw on the internet in the 90s,
Hmm.
to where it becomes absolutely ubiquitous. And the price from here is going to go a lot higher.
Okay. Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, for 2021, my prediction is 220,000 per
Okay.
coin for 2021. And longer term, really, I say there is no top to Bitcoin because there's no bottom for fiat money.
Mm.
No fiat money in history has lasted. Over the past 300 years, they've all gone to zero or
Yeah.
lost 99% of their purchasing power.
Hmm.
As Voltaire once said, all fiat money returns to its intrinsic value of zero.
Okay.
And this is, we're going to see this with the US dollar. The US dollar is at risk of going the way of the Venezuelan bolivar. Really, it's turning
Okay.
into utter garbage.
Gotcha. So I think I understand what you're saying there, but there's going to be some people who are listening who think, "Wow, this guy's talking crazy. It's Bitcoin that's going to go to zero. How can the dollar go to zero?" Right? I have my trust in the dollar. Everyone uses the dollar.
Let me
So
repeat.
go ahead.
No fiat money in the past 300 years has escaped going to zero.
Hmm.
There's been hundreds of fiat money. The average lifespan of paper money is 27 years.
Okay.
None have survived. The British pound is still around, although it's no longer backed by silver or gold or anything like that. It is purely fiat.
Hmm.
And so we can't really say it's been around for the 300 years, but even so, it's lost over 99% of its purchasing power. The
Hmm.
US dollar has lost 98 to 99% of its purchasing power. All these other currencies, many hundreds of currencies going back 300 years, have all just been disappeared. They've all been erased from existence.
Mm-hmm.
They've all gone to zero. So that's a very strong trend. How anyone could look at that history and say, well, no, the dollar is going to survive. The dollar is worth something. When it's backed by nothing except the Pentagon, as Paul Krugman at the New York Times says, the U.S. dollar is backed by men with guns. Well, guess what? The Pentagon, those guns, they cost a lot of money to keep it gassed up. You know how much it costs to keep the Pentagon at gassed up every day? The jets, the planes, the transportation, all that petrochemical. They spend $250 million a day. Yeah. And oh, by the way, we just entered into a secular bull market for commodities. Oil is going up. All the prices of everything going up. So the Fed is like, oh, we're just going to print more. We're going to print more. We're going to put another 10 trillion, 15 trillion, 20 trillion. Well, and then we're going to buy it all back and put it on our balance sheet again. We're going to monetize the debt. We're going to keep doing that. Okay, well, we already see inflation breaking out in the economy right now.
Yeah,
people are noticing it, and it's only going to get worse. So you're going to see the next few months, food and energy, it's going to be up 30, 40, 50%. Your wages are not going to be flat. They're not going up. They're going to give more coupons, in the mail. I got this from today. The Nielsen company, they sent me a letter, and they put dollars in there. They just put money in there. They put $2 in there because it's worthless coupons. It's garbage, right? It's like it's absolute garbage.
Okay. So a lot of people, I'm sure, look, for the past decade, you've been in Bitcoin way longer than I have. And so you must have dealt with every criticism and type of fear and type of FUD around Bitcoin. But addressing some of the big ones, because I think most people have heard of Bitcoin at this stage, but a lot of people don't understand how it's money or why it has value or what it's backed by, etc. So can you answer a couple of those questions for people who are listening, thinking, well, what is Bitcoin backed by? Or Bitcoin is worthless because it's not tangible or nobody uses it, etc. So can you address some of these criticisms just so people can understand it and perhaps even compare it to fiat money like you were doing before?
Well, the first question is, what is money?
Yeah.
That's the first question. So what is money?
Asking me, or is that okay?
Yeah.
So money is a unit of exchange and store of value, I would say. So money doesn't have to be money isn't just numbers on a screen or dollars or pounds, etc. Lots of different things can act as money. In the past, people have used gold, people have used beads, people have used seashells, salt, etc.
All right, let me stop you right there. You said anything can be used as money. People can use anything as money. You just said that, right?
Well, certainly as for the most general, as long as a certain group of people within that economy is willing to accept that's money. People have to put trust in it.
In the past, you've used beads, you've used stones, we used gold. They've all been used as money.
That's right.
And as long as a lot of people use it as money, it becomes money. You just said that, right?
Yep. It's based on trust within a community.
Okay. So now we've got a global community of 100 million now using Bitcoin. The first point is that they use it as money.
Yeah.
So they believe it's money. It's money because people use it as money. And that's the first point. In other words, money is whatever people think it is. Whatever the community decides it is, that's money. We know why gold has became money over time, because it has some great properties in that it has no entropy, right? It'll an ounce of gold today will remain an ounce of gold for 100 years or 200 years. It's stable in this sense. It's portable, it's divisible, it's fungible, it's desirable, and it became money, and it pushed out all the other versions of it, like beads or whatever. It's scarce. Gold is scarce, relatively scarce. And so for 5,000 years, people used ultimately gold. Even the central banks that are using fiat money, they do settle between them in gold. So we understand why gold is money. It's scarce, it's portable, it's divisible, it's desirable. And if we apply that to Bitcoin, it's absolutely scarce, unlike gold, which is only relatively scarce. Gold is inflating by 2 or 3% a year, so it's not actually as scarce as Bitcoin. It's more divisible. It's more portable. It's unconfiscatable, which gold doesn't have that property. Gold can get confiscated, and it's been confiscated in the past. In 1933, America's gold was confiscated by FDR and put in Fort Knox. Right? So gold is confiscatable. Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. It's immutable. It's indestructible. And that unconfiscatable quality, as I've talked to Black audiences for 10 years now, is key, because what's the problem with Black America is that, or the Black community around the world, is that they have their wealth confiscated over and over and over again. And the reason the Black community has embraced Bitcoin so powerfully in America right now is because they recognize this is the first form of unconfiscatable money that's been available to them for anybody ever. And so it's gaining huge traction in the Black community, as Isaiah Jackson wrote in his book, Bitcoin and Black America. He quotes me in the book several times because I've been reaching out to the Black community for 10 years and telling them, look, you know, Whitey is going to be taking your shit all day long. It's absolutely true. You know, Whitey is going to be taking your shit. It happens over and over again. And I'm saying the Black community, if you want to keep Whitey out of your shit, you put it on Bitcoin. It's unconfiscatable. You know, I can use the W word because I'm white, right? I can use the W word. The W word is okay for me to use because I'm white.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it's necessary. It's necessary to protect. So it's unconfiscatable. That's not true of gold. So you start building this. You understand what's happening here? It's got all the attributes of gold. It's even better than gold. So then, okay, don't compare it to fiat money, because fiat money is just, as we've already discussed, it has no value at all whatsoever. It's printed it has no scarcity whatsoever. They just print it by the trillions. If you look at the M1 money supply, M2, M3, they literally print trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And as a result of this, any mistake the government makes, they just paper it over with more paper money. Right. So nobody takes the dollar seriously. No one takes fiat money seriously. You know, it's complete garbage. You know, I usually have a stack of paper money right here that I've ripped up tens of thousands of dollars worth of money, paper money. It doesn't deserve any respect whatsoever. Okay. So to get back to your query, you know, we established what money is. Bitcoin fulfills the requirements of money, and it's better than gold for the reasons I just mentioned. And so we see why this is developing the way it is. It's pushing out all that other garbage money, and it's becoming the Bitcoin standard.
So why are people so resistant to those ideas then? Because as we know, the number of people, 10 years in, sure, more and more people are adopting Bitcoin. Its market cap broke $1 trillion last month, if you're going to compare it to dollars. But we're still at a stage where it's really early, right? A lot of people, the vast majority of people don't own any Bitcoin. The vast majority of people don't really understand it. A lot of people don't trust it. A lot of people think governments are going to ban it, etc. So why do you think it's just a matter of time before people really understand this and it catches on, or does something else need to happen?
Well, you mentioned a couple of things there. So the government banning it, that's one point.
Yes, that's
and then another point is people who are against it. So the people who are against it are people who are completely vested in the system as it is now, in the status quo. So people like Nouriel Roubini or Peter Schiff or Paul Krugman of the New York Times, or the people at Davos, the people at the IMF, the people at the World Bank, who are wed to paper money, who are wed to the idea that the world should be centralized, that there should be a Politburo of authoritarian and authorities who making policy for everybody. And if you were to go against that, you're a heretic, and we're going to send in the Inquisition, and we're going to burn you at the stake. So it's very similar to what we saw during the medieval times For example, when Copernicus was, suggesting that it's not the Earth at the center, but the sun, right? That was a direct assault on the Catholic Church and the power structures of that day, and it set off what we now know to become the Renaissance, and which became the Enlightenment. And Bitcoin is similar in that it's totally told the center of the elite world that their money printing fiat money central banks are not the be all and the end all. We've got something here that pushes you out. It's the first change in base layer money in 5,000 years. So they are like the priests of the church were not happy about it when they were shown up to be charlatans. The people, the elites now in the US and around the world are not happy that they're being shown up to be frauds, to be charlatans, that their philosophy is dead, their modus operandi is corrupt. So they're not happy about it. So we would want, if Bitcoin is going to be successful, it would have to attract the ire of the legacy system and the authoritarians who would be challenged by it, of course. So, but one by one they fall, and they come over to the side of Bitcoin. We've got 3 sitting Congress people in Washington now who are actively pro-Bitcoin. We've got Cynthia Lummis in Wyoming, who's a senator, who's a Bitcoiner. We've got 2 others in Washington who are now totally pro-Bitcoin. America now is starting to shift to be getting more pro-Bitcoin. So I don't, and this idea of government banning it, again, completely fallacious argument. Instead, what we're seeing is that governments are realizing they need to embrace Bitcoin to remain competitive. Yes. So they're not going to ban it. They're going to start mining it. They're going to start hoarding it because we're having what's similar to, let's say, a Sputnik moment when America entered the space race because the Soviets had put up a satellite in orbit. And then America said, we're going to land a man on the moon. Well, now you've got Iran, Russia, China, Kazakhstan, and several other countries are hoarding and mining Bitcoin. And America is going to look at that and say, wait a minute, do we want Iran to be the richest country in the world? No, we've got to start mining and hoarding Bitcoin right now. And it's got to be a hash race or a hash moment where America's got to start to get in the race here. Anybody who bans Bitcoin is going to be left for dead. Nigeria, they had a chance to become the leading Bitcoin country in the world. The government came out and said, we're going to ban it. And the people said, hey, guess what? We are going to ignore you. The Bitcoin price now is $70,000 a coin. And the people are saying, guess what? You just exposed yourself as impotent fools, and we're not going to listen to you anymore. Drop dead. Same thing in India. India is saying, oh, we're going to ban it. The people are saying, guess what? You can go pound sand. We're not going to listen to you anymore. So this is a great insurrection. It's the global insurrection against banker occupation. Thanks to Bitcoin, we're going to get rid of the nation state. We're going to get rid of the central bank. We're going to have peer-to-peer commerce with the hardest money ever known in the history of humans. And it's pro-peace. Unlike fiat money, that's pro-war. War and fiat money go together. That's Bitcoin true. Promotes peace. Bitcoin promotes love.
I know what you mean there, but can you explain can you go into that more when you said that fiat money promotes war? Can you talk about that more for some people who may not understand that immediately?
Right. So when you go to war, it's expensive.
Yes.
And if you go to war and you start running out of money, you start printing more of it because you can. So the war keeps going. And Afghanistan is a good example. America's still in Afghanistan. And why? Because they just print the money. Yeah. If they had to actually pay for the war using hard money, like the gold that is in the Fort Knox, the war would have ended, 15 years ago. Under the gold standard, wars were somewhat limited in duration because countries would run out of money. They'd run out of gold and the war would be over. And so there was a limiting factor to it. Because Bitcoin is unconfiscatable and you cannot acquire my Bitcoin through coercion or violence, unlike fiat money. America has a US dollar standard, world reserve currency. The foreign policy is give us all of your commodities and wealth in exchange for this bullshit, in exchange for this nonsensical paper money. Yeah. Or we're going to send the Marines in. Then we're going to start killing people. Like Iraq, great example. We want your oil, And Saddam said, no, I don't think so. I'm going to price it in euros instead. And America said, okay, well, we're going to kill 500,000 of your Iraqi women and children. And we're going to take over the country. And now we own the oil. How about that, buddy? And the world said, oh, bravo, bravo. Tony Blair was like, yeah, go get Saddam. Go get Saddam.
It's okay if America does it.
You know, it's pathetic. Now with Bitcoin, it's like you can send in as many Marines as you want. Everything's in Bitcoin. So you're not going to get anything. So you're wasting your time and money. Why don't you just stay in Washington, D.C. and go on the web and masturbate like all you other bureaucrats? Right? I mean, that's the only thing you're good for. You know, do a Jeff Toobin. Do a Zoom call and masturbate. I mean, that's what they're really good for. That's all they're good for. They're professional masturbators. So with Bitcoin, they're like, there's got nothing else to do. Either buy Bitcoin or shut up. Right? And there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Again, my message to those communities in America that have been treated poorly for hundreds of years, you know, this is unconfiscatable wealth.
Yeah.
You know, the KKK can show up in your door and it doesn't matter. They're not going to get your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They can burn your house down, but they still don't get your Bitcoin.
Yeah. Hopefully we're past all that as well. But
no,
we get the point.
The black community is still being murdered in the street for no reason other than being black.
Not by the KKK, man.
They go by a different name now. But white supremacy is still the operating, logic of American policy. There's no doubt about that. Tariq Nasheed, my friend Tariq Nasheed.
We'll disagree on that one, man.
For you if you don't get it.
We'll disagree on that one, man. Most black people in America are getting killed by other black people, man. We know that. That's a fact. That's a major fact.
Systemic economic disenfranchisement and the prison industrial complex, which is set up to put black men in jail, has created enormous social problems and a justice system that favors a mentality that one could liken most akin to white supremacy, which has a long history in the United States, and it's not gone away. It's not gone away.
I'm not accepting that black people are killing other black people because of white supremacy. That's not an argument I'm going to buy. But we don't need to dwell on that.
Duress in the black community was orchestrated by the white community. It leads to black on black violence because it's because essentially it's an open air prison in all these communities, which is a very violent situation. What I'm saying to the black community is like the way out is through Bitcoin, because when these guys come knocking on the door, they can't get your Bitcoin. So I mean, we can continue down this path. But there's no way you can dissuade me from my position that you've got white supremacists running America.
Nah, man, no way. Wait. That would be a big argument, but we'll save that one for later. I'm with you. I'm with you on the Bitcoin. I'm not with you on the white supremacy one. I don't think we can.
We'll take it to Clubhouse.
Yeah, we should actually. We should. Yeah, I don't think we can outsource responsibility of individuals' actions to white people all day long. It doesn't make sense, and a lot of those problems exist outside of the U.S.
We have an ongoing pogrom against ethnic minority. You're just going to create all kinds.
Where?
Absolutely.
Where? Pogroms? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Where?
Absolutely.
Where?
Look, here's the deal in America, the private prisons in America. They will go into a community, a municipality, and they'll say, outsource your prisons to us, the private corporation. And we can take that off your list of things that you need to do at your municipality. The only thing we ask is that you, the municipality, have to make sure that we're at 98% occupancy at our private prison. Mm-hmm. It's written in the contract. It's written in the prospectus. This is I'm not making this up. It's known facts. Okay. So that means that the police of that municipality go out and they need to fill the prison to 98% capacity to fulfill their contract. So they go out and arrest black men, essentially, and put them into prison to fulfill their contract. And then,
for what? Hang on.
Put those black men in prison are now working for
Hang
50
on.
cents a day. So then now they got slavery back
Max.
in America. It's back
Max.
in America. Slavery
Max.
is back. It's legal in America.
There's a real easy way to not go to prison. Real easy way. It doesn't matter your skin color. If you don't commit crime, you don't go to prison.
It doesn't matter. I think you're being naive because
How am I being naive? I think you're taking
black men and putting them into prison to fulfill their contract.
I think you're taking agency away from black people by outsourcing all of this and blaming everything on white people. Black people have agency. Black people have responsibility. If someone goes out and murders another black person, you can't blame that on a white person. If someone goes out and robs another black person, you can't blame that on a white person. I know millions. I know I'm connected to thousands of black Americans, and if you don't commit a crime, regardless of your skin color, unless in very extreme rare circumstances, you're not ending up in prison. Sure, there can be problems with the prison industrial complex. I don't doubt that.
The overriding
like
political philosophy that guides the justice system in the United States is based on white supremacy. And
What's
that can be broken down into every single layer down to the municipal level. Within that, in region by region, you will find differences, and they're on an individual basis. Of course, there's difference that's going on. But we know that with, for example, Isaiah Jackson, my friend who wrote Bitcoin in Black America, he goes into it quite specifically about the redlining that goes on, the zoning, the gerrymandering, essentially the isolation, the way that the black community is constantly deprived of bank loans and targeted and subjected to abuse and subjected to all kinds of racism constantly all the time is built into the system. And then you think
this is a bigger problem than people's actual personal responsibility and own behaviors and actions?
Yeah, I do, because it's you're living in a system of white supremacy, and that has
okay. Hang on. You keep saying white supremacy. Can you please define what you mean when you say that? Because I know what I mean.
It means exactly what it is. The white population believes that it has rights above and beyond the black population, that they're not equal.
Do you believe that?
No.
Okay. Do you think most white people in America believe that?
At some level, yes.
Okay, but you're different?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're a white supremacist, because I don't think you are, but I don't think most white Americans hold white supremacist beliefs. I don't buy that. And if you think that, I need to see some evidence.
As a whitey myself, I can tell you, I'll give you the 411 from the mind of the white community, that you have both subtle and overt racism tendencies throughout the white population.
And in the black population, perhaps.
Well, this is the minority population that's being subjected to this ideology, right? So they're the victims of this situation, and I believe the black population is less than 5% in the U.S.
No, it's not. It's 13%.
Okay, 13%.
Yeah. So where do black people actually have agency in this worldview? Because it sounds like you don't feel like black people really have agency in this situation.
They have agency with Bitcoin.
Is that it?
Yep. Just like anybody has agency with Bitcoin.
Is that not a racist comment?
It's a worldview comment. All people have agency with Bitcoin.
All people have black people's only agency is with Bitcoin. That's
in the United States. In the United States, I would say that the Bitcoin provides agency for black people. It might not be the only way or the only example of it, but with Bitcoin, you have agency with Bitcoin because you have unconfiscatable wealth, which is something that black community Americans never had that. They've never had that opportunity before.
Yeah, look, I'm not disagreeing on the Bitcoin. I think like I said, I think my problem is with what you're saying is you're removing the agency that black people have. Black people have just as much agency as white people. I'm not removing it.
I'm saying that an example
you're saying they don't have it.
With indisputable pure agency would be with Bitcoin, similar to all people in the U.S. and around the world. This is what's attracting. Bring this back to Bitcoin. Is that one of the attractions of Bitcoin is on these more philosophical points where people around the world are finding that they can transact person to person, and there's no third party, there's no government, there's no intermediary. The transaction is the settlement. right? It's a bearer instrument, and it fulfills the requirements of perfect money and perfect price discovery. And so people are kind of moving beyond a fear-based, hate-based kind of societally imposed, uh, fear that we comes down from the top, and are moving into a new direction and a new society. And that's what's attracting so many people to it. And I made the point that in the United States, when I've been talking to the Black community directly for 10 years now, what I've said is that, this is the first unconfiscatable money ever. And for the Black community, this is a great way to, whatever agency they may or may not have, to improve upon it. Because whatever the wealth that you're aggregating and making can be put on this unconfiscatable, immutable ledger called Bitcoin, and it cannot be taken from you. And that is a phenomenally new thing that's going to really, and I see it now in the Black community. If you go to Clubhouse right now, you've got the Black Bitcoin billionaire group and several others, African American and Black American groups, and they're like, they really are talking about Bitcoin in such a positive way, in a loving way, which is fantastic. And that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm observing. And that's why Bitcoin is going to go super ballistic, because it has more than just the attributes of being perfect money. It also favors love and peace over war, love and peace over violence. It defunds the state, defunds the central bank. It defunds all those legacy systems that we have unfortunately been carrying on our backs for hundreds of years, that we can just get rid of it all. It's like Gandhi, he went to the sea to make salt, because why buy salt from British people in India when I can make my own salt? And the empire left, and here we have people are saying, I don't need your fake fiat paper money. I can make my own money. You take your central bank and shove it. I don't need it. Go away. Leave me alone. And that's what's happening. Yeah. And so people are upset because they work at the central bank. They believe in the central bank. And now their belief system has been crushed, just like the British Empire got crushed when all the colonies basically said, hey, you know what? Bugger off. Just get out of my face. And go back to Surrey or Bedford or wherever you come from. Get out. Get out of here. Right now, everyone's saying that to all the central banks. They're saying, get out. That's why the price is going a lot higher.
You think is that going to be the main? What do you think is going to be the main price driver? Do you think it's going to be people looking for a hedge against inflation, or do you think it's going to come more from institutions?
It's going to come from bank failures and panic buying.
Okay.
So we see every time banks fail, people are scared into hard assets, and the best hard asset is by far Bitcoin by a huge factor. So gold will benefit a little. But people are going to go into Bitcoin because it's the fastest horse in the race, as Paul Tudor Jones describes it. Okay. And that's a huge driver of adoption on Bitcoin. There's $100 trillion, let's call it $100 trillion worth of investable assets around the world. That's just people buying stocks, bonds, property, this type of thing as investments. And only $1 trillion of that is in Bitcoin, a little less than $1 trillion. Now, those people are starting to get nervous about the global institutions. We've got an era of deglobalization now. It's no longer globalization, it's deglobalization. People look at the UK, right? You got Brexit. So now you're out of the EU. Then Scotland wants to leave the UK. And, people are breaking apart. The US, there's a secession movement in Texas. We want to leave the US down in Texas, they say, right? You've got trade between the US and China is becoming very tense. A lot of the globalization that was driven the neoliberal model post World War II is all breaking apart. And so that means that folks are going to start to look for alternatives, and they're a bit panic stricken. The IMF can't do anything. The World Bank can't do anything. NATO can't do anything. So they're like, what am I going to do with my wealth? There's 100 trillion of it. So that $1 trillion market cap for Bitcoin goes to 5, 10, 15, $20 trillion in market cap. When it gets to $11 trillion, it'll be bigger than gold. And then it'll double and triple again after that.
Yeah. Wow. And I actually have two questions here. First one is, what's the biggest threat to Bitcoin? How could this whole thing not work out? How could Bitcoin fail?
The question is not will Bitcoin fail. The question is, will humanity survive
Okay,
to see
interesting.
Bitcoin hit those high prices?
Okay,
In
what do
other
you mean
words,
by that?
Bitcoin is going to keep going whether humans are around or not. Bitcoin doesn't need humans. Bitcoin is on a
Okay,
vector, and it's going to keep going with or without humans.
you mean is going to keep getting made? You mean,
It'll keep
or
hashing. Blocks keep coming.
okay, okay.
Doesn't need humans. So humans, though, the question is, will humans survive? And that's an open question because right now there's a lot of problems, and you may see, human extinction event. But Bitcoin will be fine though. It'll keep going.
Hmm. What do you think a human extinction event would look like? That's a bit disturbing.
Uh, I
Are,
think.
are you talking like in the sort of next few? What sort of timeline are we talking about here?
Well, you got a couple of attack vectors. You got a couple of situations brewing. One would be the saber rattling that's going on right now between the major forces countries is pretty fierce, right? So
Okay.
the U.S. is definitely on a collision course with China. So that could, in fact, turn into first you have a currency war, then a trade war, then a hot war. So with the U.S. and China, the first they had that currency war went on for 20 years when China came into the World Trade Organization. Then we went into a trade war. Under Trump, remember, it was all trade, trade, trade. We need a better deal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, it seems like they're on the hot foot. They're getting into a more belligerent posturing with each other. It could end up being more of a hot war. You've got, for example, Taiwan. Looks like this is becoming a danger zone. What's been going on in Hong Kong, obviously, has been very caught the attention of folks on both sides of the Pacific. And then you've got another block of countries. You've got China, Iran, and Russia are now a block of countries. They've got the huge amount of incentive to drop the U.S. dollar, which they're in the process of doing. So they're going to drop the U.S. dollar. U.S. dollar is no longer world reserve currency. They've got a block of trade, and it's a mutual defense pact, right? If you attack one, you attack all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's potentially a hot zone right there. What's happening in Saudi Arabia? They're running out of oil, actually. So that's potentially in a hot zone in the entire Middle East. So you've got, the tensions on the geopolitical front are pretty high, I would say, relative to the last 50 years or 60 years I've been around.
Yeah.
And then on the environmental front, clearly, there's huge environmental catastrophes going on in various environmental zones around the world. So the flooding, the storms, this type of thing, it's causing what I would look at is I don't necessarily listen to the debate about it, but I watch what insurance companies are doing. So insurance companies now are no longer offering insurance because they can't afford to do the insurance for flood insurance, for example. They're falling away they're dropping out of Miami, right? So the insurance companies are saying, you buy a condo in Miami, that's great, but we're not going to insure it. So the insurance companies are kind of pulling out of the global network. So if you can't insure a property, regardless of what your opinion is on this debate, it doesn't matter because the insurance company has already made the decision for you. They're out of the business. They're not going to do it. So that's obviously problematic. And you've got the just enormous amount of people on the move from this also as some areas go underwater. There's climate migrants, right? So they're moving en masse. 300, just hundreds of thousands of people are now moving on the move because climate migration is a real thing. So that's certainly problematic. So there's that's why I say you could have an extinction event. And if in fact that were to happen, Bitcoin would still be going. So the question is not
it would be useless though.
What would stop Bitcoin, but what's going to save humans? That's the more relevant question. That's my
I don't think I could. I have my general concerns. I don't think I catastrophize quite that much. I think my view is a little. I mean, would you say your view of the future then is is optimistic or pessimistic? Because that sounds quite
Well, I'm very
catastrophic there.
optimistic because I
Okay.
think Bitcoin is going to save us. But,
Oh, interesting.
in the United States, we've had it really good. I mean, after World War II, we, quote, won that war, and it
Hmm.
was the American century. And the U.S. has been completely protected against what other people experience in other countries around the world.
Right.
And most people around the world are living, in very, very, very different lives. Many are
Hmm.
in extreme poverty. Many are absolutely going through hellacious times. The U.S. is in an island of tranquility, really, based on the World War II, and we were the world reserve currency is the U.S. dollar. So essentially, we were able to buy stuff from these countries in exchange for U.S. dollars that we just
Hmm.
print. So we get oil for money that we print. We
Yep.
get products from China for money that we print. It's free.
Hmm.
The poor in America compared to, let's say, the poor in India, it's
Yeah.
quite a different spectrum of
Yeah.
poverty.
It's definitely different. Very
Yeah, the
different.
U.S. they're living
But
like kings. The poor in America are like living like kings basically compared to where you have real poverty.
yeah. I mean, I mean, at the same time though, I mean, in the past century, the poverty levels across the world are sharply decreasing. I mean, my family background's originally from Nigeria, so I'm familiar with there, and then I grew up in the Middle East myself. And if you look at, but regardless, I mean, based on stats, based on data, based on observation, there are obviously some countries that are far ahead of others economically, but the ones that are behind, whether you're looking at China, as you mentioned, it wasn't long ago that China had way more poverty than it does now, or even India. Sure, there's still a lot of poverty, but it's getting
Right,
better.
and
African
that
countries,
global
it's getting better,
absolute
et cetera.
poverty number is
Yeah.
is now starting to creep up. So you had a few decades where it was going down,
Is
but
it going up
now,
now?
yeah, now it's starting to creep up
Is
again
that because of the whole situation this past year, or prior to
because
that?
the anti-poverty was in many ways brought to you by fiat money and the ability to borrow. China's debt load, America's debt load, all that debt. And by
Hmm.
the way, the world, the debt to GDP for planet Earth is like 300%. There's the debt to GDP.
What does that actually mean? Like debt to who? Debt to who?
The future.
Mm.
So in other words, the reason why college kids have to go into debt to afford college, the reason why healthcare in America is unaffordable by most, the reason why people can't afford a house is because of the debt. That's what it means to people right now is debt. And that's
Yeah.
only getting worse. And the interest on the debt is now becoming a factor. So the interest
Hmm.
on the debt on America's debt is now getting close to in size to what we spend on the military. So it's getting just the interest on the debt.
So
So you
what would
can't,
actually? Sorry,
yeah.
I'm wondering what would. This is something I've always been intrigued by, and I've never really, because whenever I hear that countries have X amount of debt, I've never. It's one of those things that I've never totally understood, because I'm always thinking, wait, who's this? Who's this debt to? And can they not just keep playing this game where they just keep on printing and doing whatever they're doing currently to keep sort of escaping this debt as
Yeah,
it keeps
great,
building it
great
up?
question.
What
So
makes
in
that
19,
house of cards fall?
yeah, 1971, the
Okay.
U.S. went off the gold standard, and we entered into a period of pure fiat money. So
Okay.
no country had a currency backed by gold or anything like that. It was the first time in history. It was an experiment. Okay, we're all going to be fiat money,
Hmm.
and all currencies are going to be backed by other fiat money. So it just goes around in this huge daisy chain of fiat money. It's backed by this fiat money, backed by that fiat money.
Yeah.
So then, going forward, um, you have a situation where um, the amount of printed money to support what is essentially a Ponzi scheme continues to escalate exponentially because the the debts being run by these individual countries are not being paid back by GDP and the taxes that come with GDP. So the debt on the balance sheet of all these individual countries keeps growing and growing and growing. Even in the UK now, it's well over 100%. And it's that in Japan, it's almost 300%. So they keep writing checks for stuff that they pay for with that by printing more and more money. So then what happens is the ability, as long as all the banks are working together the central banks around the world, then there's no obvious problem. Mm-hmm. And again, to get back to Bitcoin, as Christine Lagarde at the IMF said recently, Bitcoin is an escape valve. In other words, with Bitcoin now, people like Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy can look at this debt daisy chain that's building up around the world, and he can say, you know what? I know they're telling me there's no inflation, but in fact, I can see that there is inflation running at 15 to 20% a year. Mm-hmm. And if I use that debt, and if I can borrow money at less than 1%, which is part of this whole debt fandango, this debt daisy chain, is that everyone keeps rates really, really low. Mm-hmm. And I buy Bitcoin, I can make a ton of money. We saw something similar in 1993 with George Soros and the Bank of England. He launched a speculative attack against the Bank of England. He essentially booted them out of the exchange rate mechanism and made $1 billion. Yeah. Stan Druckenmiller was working with him at that time. So now what Michael Saylor, Elon Musk, and Jack Dorsey at Twitter are doing by putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet by the billions and billions, mm-hmm. is they're saying we essentially they're attacking the system. They're attacking the central banks. They're attacking fiat money. They could have borrowed that money to buy back their own stock, and their executive stock options would be up wildly in price. Yeah. But they said, you know what? Actually, we're going to make more money by attacking the system, by taking your 1% money that is artificially low interest rates, and we're going to buy this immutable, unconfiscatable, perfect money called Bitcoin, and we're going to trigger this global central bank catastrophe. I think when the history is written of this, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy will be cited as the shot heard around the world, as the shot that started the global insurrection against banker occupation. And we're seeing it right now. It's an escape valve. Yeah. People who want to escape this nightmare of paper money are doing it with Bitcoin. And now these corporate CEOs are doing it. And they're doing it in billions and billions. And that is growing quickly. And that's the problem with debt. And that's where we're going to see the mark to market of this debt. That's where it's going to be revealed the negative impact of that debt, because the governments will say they have no way of diminishing that debt. They have no way of handling that debt. They can't simply ignore it. So this is a one-way bet. And if you think about how much debt is out there, there are hundreds of trillions of dollars. In fact, the derivatives market, which is another layer of fake money on top of this existing layer of fake money, is worth well over a quadrillion. Wow. You're talking about a quadrillion of bad paper that's going to find its way into Bitcoin. Wow. That's a lot higher Bitcoin price.
I don't even know what a quadrillion is. Like, is that what's that?
1,000 trillion? 1,000 trillion is a quadrillion.
I can't even. How much money is in the world? Like, what's the value of everything in the world?
300 trillion.
300 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
That's the value of the assets of the world. Okay. Then you have derivatives, which are trading on top of that as in terms of financial derivative contracts that are. Mm-hmm. Instruments that are used in finance, and that layer is worth well over a quadrillion. Wow. The total Forex market, by the way, which is just the amount of money traded in Forex, yen, dollar, pounds, that's over, last I checked, $5 trillion a day. Yeah, a day.
Crazy.
And now getting back to interest rates for a second, let's talk about another concept, which I call interest rate apartheid.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and again, with the black disenfranchisement in America, it's done in many ways using interest rates. So, Whitey, like me, if I've got a friend at Goldman Sachs, I can borrow money at 0%. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of folks out there, and to a large degree, the black population, they can't get any money at any percent. But if they can, they're going to be charged a lot higher rates of return, a lot higher interest rates, 16, 17%. Look at credit card rates. Credit cards are 17, 18, 19% on your credit card. And that hasn't changed in 10, 15 years, even though interest rates as a whole have dropped down to near zero. Yeah. Because banks who are lending at 0% to their close friends to buy assets because the bank has assets on their books. If they lended 0% to a hedge fund on Wall Street who's going to go buy a penthouse on Park Avenue, the penthouse market goes up, and so do the bank's assets that they have on their books. They go up, and then they use those assets as collateral to go out and do more financial games in the derivatives market. But if you don't have assets and you go into the bank, or you're living on credit cards and you're borrowing money to buy groceries, they're charging you 18%. The banks don't care about you, because you don't own a house, you don't own an asset, and you're not going to help them. Their assets go up. So they gouge you. They rip you off. They steal your money. There's Whitey again, stealing your money. Whitey's doing a runner. He's stealing your money with interest rates.
Aren't they stealing poor Whitey's money as well?
Yeah, definitely.
I was going to say, isn't that surely that's wealth and class based rather than race based, right? I mean, sure, there'll be some correlations, but it's
absolutely.
I don't like making things racial issues if they're not. More. What's that?
Blacks get ripped off more.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe so.
I don't like making things racial issues that are other issues. If something is socioeconomic or
there's some overlapping.
I know there's overlap. Of course, and I know that some of that dates back to historical issues. I just I'm not a big fan of over racializing things, as you've probably noticed. But in terms of what's happening, in terms of the next, let's see, I don't know. How do you see the next sort of 2 to 3 years playing out in this regard when it comes to Bitcoin, when it comes to what guys like Michael Saylor and Elon Musk have sort of set off in the past few months? Do you think that that's going to lead to more and more CEOs and billionaires diving in and doing the same thing? Do you think all these trillions of dollars and pounds are being printed in the wake of this virus pandemic, et cetera? Just where do you see it going in the short to midterm?
I think it's going to lead to a collapse in confidence of the U.S. dollar.
Okay.
Which means that you've got, hyperinflationary expectations now coming into the system.
U.S. dollar specifically, or just all the large currencies? Does that go the same for the British pound, the euro, et cetera?
Yeah, it goes for all fiat money, but the U.S. dollar is still world reserve currency, so it has the greatest impact, and it's so specifically the U.S. dollar would have the most to lose. And I think it's going to undermine faith in the dollar, and which means you got inflation is a real problem. Michael Burry, who did the Big Short, he's been tweeting wildly about inflation, saying, folks, you got to wake up because this thing is about to blow. Once the inflation genie comes out of the bottle, you can't get it back in because it's a wild beast. I lived when I started on Wall Street in 1982. It was right after Paul Volcker. When he was Fed chairman, to fight inflation, he took the short rate up, or the 10-year rate up to 20%, because of to try to defeat inflation. Yeah. And now since 1980, he had a 40-year bull market in bonds because rates have gone down for 40 years. That's a secular bull market in bonds that's lasted 40 years. If that breaks and you have a secular bear market in bonds, which means interest rates go up, all the financialization of the past 40 years and all those derivative contracts blow up. They blow up badly, like we saw in 2008 when there was a giant credit freeze and nobody would lend to anybody. Banks wouldn't lend to other banks. The overnight rate went to like 8, 9, 10% between banks because they didn't trust each other. And you have a complete credit freeze. Now multiply that times 100 is what we're talking about. If CEOs and wealthy people around the world pile into Bitcoin and kiss central banks goodbye. They're like, goodbye.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Max, this has been a really, really fascinating conversation. It's been so good to have you on the podcast. If people want to find out more about what you're doing and your thoughts, et cetera, what's the best place for them to check you out and follow you?
Well, we have our YouTube channel. It's Orange Pill. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, Orange Pill. We got a Telegram group, which is t.me/Orange Pill. We got a daily newsletter, the Orange Pill Daily Dose. You can sign up for it, orangepilldailydose.com. It's me saying interesting things right in your mailbox every day. I mean, what could be better?
What could you want? What more could you want?
So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Max Keiser, thank you so much for coming on the Real Talk with Zuby show. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right, Zuby, anytime.